stepping back a little bit from the day-to-day news and talking about some great history book recommendations. Last couple of years on the YouTube channel, on the Burning Archive YouTube channel, I have been doing reviews of both the Cundill History Prize. It's a history prize based at McGill University in Canada, and the Wolfson History Prize, which is a history prize based in Britain. It's the longest or wealthiest or richest prize in Britain, the most prestigious prize for history in Britain, the Wolfson History Prize. John Darwin's After Tamerlane, which I do talk about quite a bit on the show, won in whenever John Darwin won, 2008 maybe, I guess. And also this author by Joy Chatterjee, Shadows at Noon, the South Asian 20th Century, also won the prize. So it's a great guide, and I'm going to be taking you through live my reaction to the long list of the Cundill History Prize. Here, the Cundill History Prize long list. And the Cundill History Prize is based in Canada, and it is also, I'll just bring one other thing up for you. There we go. You can see it a little bit more clearly here. So it's a prize that is based in Canada, and it awards quality book. It has really quite a good transnational focus. I mean, it tends to kind of award its prize to the sort of North American Academy largely, and it has a bit of an English bias, not totally so, but and if there are any viewers there who know some of the better history prizes outside of the Anglophone world, do let me know in the comments. But every year they issue this long list, and I think there are 15 books in this long list, and they are what I'm going to sort of preview for you all today. And I'm literally going to do this sort of live for you. And what I'll just do, if you just bear with me 1 second, I'll just bring up the little, this one here, while I just do a little bit of turning away from the camera work and increasing my ability and your ability to actually read these things. And there we are. Okay, so let me then add this one to stage. Bang. Add to stage. Remove. Add. Bang. Okay, so we're going to go through this list, and I'm just going to give you, let you know what they are, because I mean, one of the things I really like to do, in terms of just getting new, fresh perspectives on history and world affairs, is to just check out some of the top books and history prize lists to get some ideas for some of the fresh current approaches to studying these issues, and not just sort of go back to the same old things that might have been recommended to you at high school or 20 years ago or 50 years ago, but to read some of the current history, because history has gone through a lot of transformations over the last 50 years. There's a much greater focus on global transnational history, a much greater focus on how freeing up of some of the theoretical approaches, and all sorts of changes in perspective. And what's more, it's perhaps surprisingly, every now and then new kinds of evidence come into play. New documents appear, new ways of using different types of historical evidence come into play. For example, Peter Frankopan's book about the history of the planet really, plumbs all the sort of scientific and other evidence over the historical transformations in the environment over, the last however many years it has been. So I find this is just a great way to sort of come up with some different approaches to things and think about different issues. So so I'm just going to rattle through these and offer my comments and let you know about each of them so that perhaps you can also check out some of these books. Okay, so let's add we go there. Okay, so the first book on the list is by Manan Ahmed Asif, Disrupted City, Walking the Pathways of Memory and History in Lahore. This sounds fascinating. Urban history is a really, really interesting thing. Let me just share this tab with you. This is the actual book there. Disrupted City, Walking the Pathways of Memory and History in Lahore in Pakistan. And this provides a stunning history of Pakistan's cultural and intellectual capital from one of the preeminent scholars of South Asia. So again, it's a fascinating way to sort of get a different perspective on. We don't hear a lot about Pakistan in the Western media. What one does hear about it is usually in the conflicts, context of war and changes and security services and the conflicts with India, that sort of thing. And so this gives us a sense of what the actual the cultural history of Lahore is, and that will be fascinating. So I reckon that sounds like a good one, so do check that one out. The second book is by Emily Kalachi, Wages for Housework, The Story of a Movement, an Idea, a Promise. Now, this is interesting, I think, as well. Let me share the actual book there. You can see that there, Wages for Housework, Emily Kalachi. And this is the story about, across the globe in the 1970s, a network of feminists distilled their struggles into a single demand: wages for housework. Today, it remains a provocative idea and an unfulfilled promise. I remember this being like, when I was growing up in the 1970s, being, quite a strong, important history. It says here, Emily Kalachi is professor of history at the University of Wisconsin and Madison. And again, how we organize our working lives, both our, I guess our public and our private working lives, is one of the fundamental drivers of history. So this sounds a really fascinating topic as well. So I would recommend that to viewers. The third book on the list is by Cornell Chang, A Fractured Liberation, Korea Under US Occupation. Now, I have talked about this issue with KJ No on the program, and there you can see the book by Cornell Chang, A Fractured Liberation, Korea Under US Occupation. The story of, the Korean War and the US occupation, both after 1945 and after the Korean War, which, of course, divided North Korea and South Korea, is, undertold and very important and very tragic. There's also a great book by Michael Pembroke about all of this that describes the Korean War. It's the start of the American century. And it really ought to be better known, this history. And it played out in the whole question of the international adoption scandal, which I actually discussed with KJ No on the program not so long ago. So this is very much worth checking out, this book. I think I may well check this one out. I do notice, here we go, A Poignant Return to Korea's Forgotten Asian Spring. A moment ripe with possibility denied by the post-war US military occupation. When Japanese imperial rule ended in August 1945, the Korean peninsula erupted with hopes that had been bottled up for 40 years. It had been occupied by Japan. It had previously, for a very, very, very long time, been an independent country. Electrifying excitement jolted Koreans into action everywhere. Peasants occupied farmlands, workers seized control of factories, and women demanded political and economic equality. And of course, dare I say it, capitalist America was not so keen on that. Of course, it was fighting the Soviet Union. It was engaging in a brutal ideological struggle, which was in part, conflict between economic systems, socialist versus capitalist, and also ideologies of freedom versus, I guess, the ideological values of socialism in its, ideal state of, the proletariat, the workers' rights, and all that sort of thing. So this sounds like a really, really fascinating story. So do check this one out. I think I will be checking this one out as well. Let's go to the next book, which is by Santilla Chingapi, Black Convicts, How Slavery Shaped Australia. And I can tell you, I was quite intrigued by that title. So I checked this one out a little bit earlier before. Let me just see if I can make you can see it there, I hope. Black Convicts, How Slavery Shaped Australia. Now, this story, if I just read from the promo here, is the story of Australia's black convicts has been all but erased from our history. In recovering their lives, Santilla Chingapi offers a fresh understanding of this A Fatal Shore. That's a famous book about the convicts in Australia, The Fatal Shore, by Robert Hughes, who was an art critic. It was a controversial book showing how empire, slavery, race and memory have shaped our nation. And it really describes the stories of African descent convicts who came to Australia. At least 15 on the first fleet when the first, British settlement in Australia. And it again got to 500. And so this is a fascinating story. Again, it's this sort of transnational story of, we don't just put people have moved around the world for centuries and centuries and centuries. We don't all live in these little national boxes. There's an African side to Australia's story that Santilla Chingapi brings out. And Santilla Chingapi is a filmmaker, historian, and author whose work explores settler colonialism, slavery, and post-colonial migration in Australia. And you know what? I might even see if she might come on the show to have a chat about this book, which sounds absolutely fascinating. All right, let's go to our next book by Marlene L. Doubt, The First and Last King of Haiti, The Rise and Fall of Henry Christophe. There we are. The First and Last King of Haiti, The Rise and Fall of Henry Christophe. You can see a little picture of him there. And what have we got here? The essential biography of the controversial rebel traitor and only king of Haiti. Henry Christophe is one of the most richly complex figures in the history of the Americas and was, in his time, popular and famous the world over. Brilliant. So he was born in 1767 to an enslaved mother. Yes, it's there's a whole story of rebellion in the various sort of slave economy sort of islands of the Caribbean and so forth. And off the African and American coasts. Uh, that is truly fascinating. So I didn't know this story at all. This sounds like a ripper. So do check that one out if you're interested in that one as well. Of course, also go to your public library, of course, because, if one buys every book on this list, I don't want anyone to impoverish themselves by doing this sort of thing. Okay, next book on the list is by Jonathan Guinap, Against Constitutional Originalism, a Historical Critique. And I think this is very much a book for the sort of this constitutional originalism is a very big thing in the United States political scene. This sounds like it's very much one for the lawyers. I think it's probably a bit will go over my head, but if you're really interested in the whole American constitutional issues, do check this one out. Then we go to Greg Grandin, America, a New History of the New World, with the accent there emphasizing, like Felipe Fernandez Amesto, a former guest on the show, has mentioned, the Hispanic aspect of America. And I think I might well get this one out. It says Greg Grandin is a winner of the Pulitzer Prize. He is the Van Woodward Professor of History at Yale University. And let me read a little profile of this book here. The story of the United States' unique sense of itself was forged facing south, no less than South Latin America's was indelibly stamped by the looming colossus to the north. In this stunningly original reinterpretation of the New World, Professor Greg Grandin reveals how the Americas emerged from the constant turbulent engagement with each other, shedding new light on well-known historical figures like Bartolomé de las Casas, Simon Bolivar and Woodrow Wilson, as well as lesser-known actors such as the Venezuelan Francisco de Miranda, who almost lost his head in the French Revolution and conspired with Alexander Hamilton to free America from Spain. Interesting. I will check it out. I think it, to some degree, sounds like it covers similar territory, I guess, to the history of America outside of the country. I think it is that, or I think that's, or our story, or our country, something like that. Our America, Felipe Fernandez Amesto's history. Sort of Hispanic history of the United States of America, which I sort of profiled earlier in the year on my Substack and did a couple of videos on it about how America is a Latino nation, that there's this sort of warp and weft in American history of the East-West, the standard story, if you like, of the East-West movement of the British 13 colonies over to, California. Wiping out everything in the way, sort of thing. And then the North-South dimension, which is the Spanish Empire, the indigenous peoples of, America moving and the gradual conquest of former Spanish territories like Mexico and California and Florida in the United States. So I may well check this book out, even maybe see if I can't get Greg Grandin onto the program. Okay, what have we got next? And we have Tia Miles, Night Flyer, Harriet Tubman, and the Faith Dreams of a Free People. A little bit of a tongue twister there. Let me bring that one up for you. There we are. Harriet Tubman and the Faith Dreams of a Free People. And the story here is Harriet Tubman is among the most famous Americans ever born and soon to be the face of the $20 bill. There you go. Didn't know that. Not in Australia, obviously. Yet often she's a figure more out of myth than history, almost a comic book superhero. Despite being barely 5 feet tall, unable to read, and suffering from a brain injury, she managed to escape from her own enslavement, return again and again to lead others north to freedom without loss of life, speak out powerfully against slavery, then become the first American woman in history to lead a military raid, freeing some 700 people. You could almost say she's America's Robin Hood, a miraculous vision often rightly celebrated, but seldom understood. Interesting story. Let's go to the next one, which is Benjamin Nathan's To the Success of Our Hopeless Cause, The Many Lives of the Soviet Dissident Movement, by Benjamin Nathans. And what have we got here? So it's a discussion of the dissident movement, samizdat, the imprisonments, the stories of Sakharov and Solzhenitsyn. An extraordinary account of this story. Interesting. I may check it out. I've got to confess, there's just way too much semi-propaganda that's produced out of the American Academy, and especially out of the American journalistic scene. So I might just sort of see what I can find about that. I've got some a great guest coming up shortly, who a few weeks ago I had Sheila Fitzpatrick, of course, the very, 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 very distinguished historian of the Soviet Union and Russia, on the show. Do check that interview out if you haven't already. She also knew some of the sort of reformer communists in the late 1960s and 1970s. So yeah, I will check out Benjamin Nathan's book, but I'm just a little bit worried. It's in the Anne Applebaum sort of tradition, and unfortunately, Anne Applebaum, I think she used to be a judge on the Cundill History Prize, and I think sometimes that kind of perspective does rather bias the decisions. Now, the next book on the list is this one by Josephine Quinn, How the World Made the West, a 4,000-Year History. Do write this one. I've actually read this one. It's I haven't been able to say this for any of these books so far, but I have read this one, or at least the first half or so of this one. and I will make my way through it. It's really quite fascinating. It goes to the whole question that I covered in my video about, how the West is a bit of a myth. The story of the West is a myth, and uh, the book by, I think it's Nasha McSweeney, the myth of the West. I can't quite remember its title, but and it's sort of a story of 14 lives in the story of the West. This is more of a sort of a deeper, almost, look at the archaeological and other kind of evidence about it. It's focused more on the earlier period, but it does really make the argument that, what we think of as Western civilization, ancient Rome, ancient Greece, all this sort of stuff is very much a history of a blended set of cultures. And it's a very, very different story. So I think this is definitely one that people ought to check out. Flipping back to, how many have we got? We've got about 4 or 5 left to go. I hope everyone's doing okay there on the stream. I will get through the list. Seth Rockman, Plantation Goods, a material history of American slavery. Again, a Pulitzer Prize finalist in history, eye-opening rethinking of 19th century American history reveals the interdependence of the northern industrial economy and the southern slave labor, a material history of American slavery. Excellent book, I think, especially if you're interested in that more sort of, social history, economic history dimension of things. Now, this book is one by Lyndall Roper. I haven't read this book, but I know of Lyndall Roper. She's, in fact, originally from the same university that I studied at, Melbourne University, from Melbourne, Lyndall Roper. And but I think she's been at Oxford or something like that for quite a long time. She's quite a distinguished scholar of late medieval Reformation sort of history, pre-modern history, and this is Summer of Fire and Blood, which is the definitive history. It's I can't see it's taken me, here we go. There we go. The Summer of Fire and Blood, the German Peasants' War. This is amazing conflict that happens in the 1500s, in conflict that's related to sort of Martin Luther and the Reformation, but Martin Luther kind of disavows, I guess, the peasants who are rebelling to some degree in the name of his sort of faith. And it says here, the German Peasants' War was the greatest popular uprising in Western Europe before the French Revolution in 1524 and 1525. It swept across Germany with astonishing speed as thousands of people massed in armed bands to demand a new and more egalitarian order. The peasants took control of vast areas of southern and middle Germany, torching and plundering the monasteries, convents and castles that stood in their way, but they would prove no match for the forces of the lords, who put down the revolt by slaying somewhere between 70 and 100,000 peasants in just over 2 months. So it's the first history of this war in a generation, and it uncovers the far-reaching ramifications of this doomed rebellion. Fascinating. I think, again, I was talking with Pascal Letaz about, the Westphalian world order, which was a response to the 30 Years' War in in Germany or in Europe, particularly sort of Central Europe, between 1618 and 1648, roughly, began in a way at Prague Castle, with the defenestration of Prague, which you can, go to that window if you visit Prague Castle in Prague. And it is a fascinating story. And again, German Peasants' War, very foundational in a lot of an older generation of stories of German history, of Marxist history as well, because the social revolt of the German Peasants' War was very much interpreted in by Marxists in a certain way. And it will be quite interesting to see how Lyndall Roper, who I think has a very strong background in sort of cultural history, interprets this sort of story, and how it perhaps reframes the sequence of events, the Reformation, because the division between of the religious divisions introduced by the Reformation in Europe are, if you like, a significant part of the 30 Years' War, and their resolution is in part a significant aspect of the Treaty of Westphalia, and it's part of the real history of the Treaty of Westphalia that tends to be forgotten, really, or misunderstood, I think, by a lot of international relations scholars who just refer to this event as, the birth of principles of national sovereignty and international world order. That looks like a really fascinating book, which I will get to at some point over the next little while. Then we have Sophia Rosenfeld, The Age of Choice, a history of freedom in modern life. Well, that's an interesting concept. Let's see what this is. Sophia Rosenfeld, I'm not sure who she is. Here we are, author. Sophia Rosenfeld is a professor of history at University of Pennsylvania, author of Democracy and Truth and Common Sense, and she's also publishes in big journals and things. And what do we say? Choice touches virtually every aspect of our lives. Sorry, wrong one. Here we are. Choice touches virtually every aspect of our lives, from what to buy and where to live, to whom to love, what profession to practice. But the option to choose in such matters was not something we always possessed or even aspired to. So how did it come that this thing became such a thing? The Age of Choice tells the long history of the invention of choice as the defining feature of modern freedom. This sounds like a really fascinating history, and she explores it in the context of romantic life, politics, ideals of human rights, the lives of women, reproductive rights, and those kind of things. And it integrates scientific findings about choice in psychology and economics. Again, this sounds like a fascinating one. And I should say, if any of these books are of particular interest to you, do let me know in the comments, and I will see what I can do about maybe even interviewing the author on the show, and also or reaching out to the authors on the show, see if they'd be interested in having a chat about their book, and also maybe even doing a little review of the book on the channel as well. Let me quickly then go to our next book. We've got two to go. The next one is Martha Sandweiss, The Girl in the Middle. Yes, you can see that. A Recovered History of the American West. a haunting image of an unnamed native child and a recovered story of the American West. Okay, so this is the story of the photograph that here appears on the cover of the book. You can see the native child and some sort of military official types or men surrounding her. She's wrapped in a blanket. And it says, in 1868, celebrated Civil War photographer Alexander Gardner travelled to Fort Laramie to document the federal government's treaty negotiations with the Lakota and other tribes of the Northern Plains. Gardner, known for his iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln and his visceral pictures of the Confederate dead at Antietam, posed 6 federal peace commissioners. There you go, like your standard American peace candidates and peace presidents. You got your peace commissioners conducting wars with a young native girl wrapped in a blanket. The hand-labelled prints carefully name each of the men, but the girl is never identified. As the girl in the middle goes in search of her, it draws readers into the entangled lives of the photographer and his subject. Now, this is fascinating, and this is an example. I think when I did my interview with Sophie Loy Wilson about sort of China-Australia relationship, she talked about this sort of new sort of pattern, I guess, in history, or a pattern of history of sort of telling micro stories of condensed individual stories in where rather than tell the big picture and empires and class and all this sort of stuff, tell these sort of micro stories of individuals in enigmatic situations and follow the strands where they take you, because we all know from life it's complicated. We all know from history it's just as complicated, and this is a great way to sort of bring that out. So this sounds like very much a good book to read. That is Martha Sandweiss, The Girl in the Middle, A Recovered History of the American West. And then we get to our final of these 15 books, and it's by Sanjay Subramaniam, Across the Green Sea, Histories from the Western Indian Ocean. Beautiful picture there you can see on the cover of the book. I'll just focus in on that so you can see that a little bit better. And what have we got here? And Sanjay Subramaniam, I think, is a very distinguished scholar of empires and things like that. Let me see. I did think he was at the University of Oxford at some point. Sanjay Subramaniam is a distinguished professor of history and the Irving and Jean Stone Chair in Social Sciences at UCLA in California, educated in Delhi. He previously taught at a couple of in Paris and at Oxford, and he's a specialist of the early modern period, whose books include Europe's India, Words, People, Empires, 1500, 1800, and Empires Between Islam and Christianity. And William Dalrymple, who's no slouch himself, writes probably the greatest living Indian historian. So I am absolutely going to check this book out, and maybe also all of Sanjay Subramaniam's books out. Let me just read to you what it says. Beginning in the mid-15th century, the regions bordering the West Indian Ocean, the Green Sea as it was known, underwent vast transformation, and an era of commercial and cultural exchange blossomed. In Across the Green Sea, Sanjay Subramaniam recounts the history of this ocean from a variety of shifting viewpoints. He sets the scene with the withdrawal of China's Ming Dynasty. This is the famous, treasure boats of, can't remember the name now, Shanghai or something like that, and it stops at some point. The court decides it's all too expensive and there are internal struggles they need to focus on, although the reasons are much debated. Withdrawal of the China's Ming Dynasty and explores how the Western Indian Ocean was transformed by the growth and increasing prominence of the Ottoman Empire and the continued spread of Islam into East Africa. He examines how several cities, including Mecca and the vital Indian port of Surat, grew and changed during these centuries when various powers interacted until famines and other disturbances upended the region in the 17th century. Rather than proposing now, this is really interesting. Rather than proposing an artificial model of a dominant centre and its dominated peripheries, which is the thinking that still dominates. Hang on. Let me see. I'll just bring myself here back into the picture. It's the thinking that still dominates, hegemon, challenger, American primacy. It's also the thinking that dominates like a lot of radical sort of world system, Emmanuel Wallerstein and all that sort of things, sort of the critique of imperialism, the core and the periphery sort of struggle that dominates a lot of thinking about geopolitics, etc. He also says that, which is and just showing a great comment there from Violet about the sort of micro story approach. He also it's a very different way of thinking about it. So rather than proposing an artificial model of a dominant centre, let me fix this up, and its dominated peripheries across the Green Sea, reveals the complexity of a truly dynamic and polycentric system through the use of connected histories, a method which Subramaniam himself has pioneered. I feel I might have read one of his books. I just can't remember. And certainly aware of his work. This is quite exciting. I will absolutely be checking this out. And I may well, as I say, either review it here on the program or see if I can't even get this very distinguished historian to have a chat with me. You never really know how people react when you send them emails out of the blue, but sometimes they do accept. And I've got to tell you, I've got a couple of great guests coming up on the show. As I mentioned, I did an interview with Salvatore Barbones earlier this week, and he'll be talking about his book Dhamma Democracy. But I've also got talking to a couple of other great guests, who including Michael Pembroke, who appeared on Pascal Lataz's show not so long ago, and a great scholar of the sort of entry into diplomacy and entry into war of the Soviet Union in World War II, which will help, I guess, reframe this story, which has become very, very complex and controversial in recent times. But I really hope that this little guide to the 15 books on the Cundill History Prize long list, which just let me recap them all for you. I think will I be able to? Yeah, they're sort of in a slightly different order there, I can see. But we've got A Fractured Liberation, which is the story about Korea. So I'll go from top left across. The book by Sanjay Subramaniam, Across the Green Sea, which sounds a ripper. We've got the book about, just trying to do a few too many things at once here, so I hope you forgive me that. Against Constitutional Originalism by Jonathan Ginnap. America by Greg Grandin. Black Convicts by Santilla Chingapi. Disrupted City. Manan Ahmed Asif's Disrupted City, Walking the Pathways of Memory and History in Lahore. How the World Made the West by Jonathan Quinn. I think that is the Lyndall Roper on the German Summer of Fire and Blood. Oh no, that's not it. That is, what is that book there? The print is too small for me to read properly. Sorry about this. It is To the Success of Our Hopeless Cause, The Many Lives of the Soviet Dissident Movement by Benjamin Nathans. Then we have Night Flyer by Tia Miles, which is about Harriet Tubman. We have Plantation Goods by Seth Rockman, which is a material history of American slavery. We have Lyndall Roper's Summer of Fire and Blood about the German Peasants' War. Highly, highly, highly distinguished historian. The fascinating, curious sort of cultural, intellectual history, The Age of Choice, A History of Freedom and Modern Life by Sophia Rosenfeld. The story that I've just discovered about the first and last king of Haiti, The Rise and Fall of Henry Christophe by Marlene L. Doubt, D-A-U-T, I hope I've said that name correctly. The Girl in the Middle, the fascinating sounding micro story, if you like, by where is the Martha Sandweiss. And finally, Wages of Housework by where are you? Wages of Housework by Emily Kalachi. So all, no doubt, brilliant books. They've been commended by the panel on the Cundill History long list, and definitely worth checking out. So if you just Google Cundill History Prize, Cundill, they have a list of all the books and all those links that I went through there on the website. I know a couple of years ago when I interviewed Marie Favreau, whose fabulous book about the Mongols and the Golden Horde, the Mongol Empire, and its successor states, the Golden Horde, on the show. She was actually one of the judges on the Cundill History Prize that year. And so, yeah, it's definitely one of the, high prestige history prize. But more than anything, it just helps identify these books that, you won't often get to see publicized in mainstream media or on YouTube channels. A lot of the, kind of history books that get automatically generated by algorithms, Gibbon's Rise and Fall, or, Spengler or whatever, history books that are really outdated and don't really reflect the sort of current practice of people. So it's really worth going to somewhere like the Cundill History Prize just to see what's coming out, see the new, fresh sort of ideas, to see some of the sort of work of, like, Lyndall Roper is I guess she's about my age or a little bit older than me. So she's sort of, it's a very distinguished and long practicing historian who's written what looks like it will be, the authoritative history of the German Peasants' War for decades to come. So it really does give you ideas about things that you can explore, which you won't really get just by, following the same old tracks. So I really do think it's a fabulous thing to do.